Hello, comrades and peers. It's been a few months since the last rule review. But as compensation, today's candidate is a particularly interesting piece of a Napoleonic system. Generla de Armee by David C. R. Brown. Published at Reiswitz Press. Contrary to what the name first led me to believe, the basis of the game is a division, or at the largest a corps. This corresponds somewhat to the game size of Soldiers of Napoleon, with which it has other similarities too. The flow of the game let me think of General de Armee as bigger brother of Soldiers of Napoleon. The rules are written for 15mm and have option distance for 28mm included. Suggestions for 6mm are also given. There are guidelines for basing, but not strict rules, so every kind of base should be okay. The odd additional skirmish base might come in handy in this game. The structure of the core rules in this book corresponds to the flow of the game. Command, charge, movement, skirmish, fire combat, moral, melee, and destiny. At last, follow some optional rules to tweak your game. Command. If you ever played games coming from Lard Island, you will know what to expect. In this game, you will fight against multiple opponents. The chaos on the battlefield, time, and the opposing general. Discipline, keeping it, and to know where you can let it slip are the key to victory. Each of your brigades must roll at the beginning of a turn if they obey your overall orders, or if they hesitate and act only cautious. And there is a 33% chance they will not obey. But every brigade brings an aide de camp with it. This is your tool to ensure discipline of a brigade, or to push them to glorious deeds, if he is available for service and not underway. Some instructions, like infantry assault, need more than one ADC, or you can send more than one aide to ensure your special orders is obeyed to the letter. So at the beginning of the command phase, you dice for available ADCs. Then you distribute them with their orders to the different brigades. After this, you check each brigade if they obey or hesitate to follow your whims. Be sure you will never have enough aides, and in the wrong moment your plans will be busted by destiny. But to this later. Charge. For me, another important core element of this game. After you declare charge, a first combat takes place, one before melee, a combat of wills. Will your soldiers charge home, or will they break in defense fire? Do they decide to fire back with their muskets instead of fighting man against man, or does the enemy flee? Technically, the defender can react to a charge and normally fire in defense. After casualties, both players roll 2d6 and add different modifiers for status, casualties, etc. Supporting units enable you to re-roll one or both dice. The result is read off in a table. That the charge results in a melee is therefore never certain. In my test game, there were around 12 charges, but only 2 melee actions. Dislocating the enemy becomes higher priority than actual fights. The rules for movement and maneuver are easy and streamlined. Only the difference between columns and mass columns was a bit daunting while reading the rules. This is probably more related to some spicier tactics of the earlier editions. Brigade acts in an assigned zone and can maneuver quite free in it as long as it obeys orders. To assign a brigade to another zone or to release one onboard reserve, you need to assign an aide, with a special order in the command phase. Each brigade receives a skirmish screen for free, who can operate semi-independent on the vicinity of the brigade. While the normal battalions accumulate damage points, skirmish screens can lose bases and can even be reinforced by converting battalions into skirmishers. For fire combats, there are a distinction between normal, superior, or inferior salvo fire, skirmish, and garrison fire. In addition, the usual cannon ranges. As a result, the effectiveness of a unit is heavily dependent on its condition. We are back to discipline. If you ask too much of a soldier, the effectiveness can drop drastically. This is a game where you think about whether it makes sense before you give a fire order. In the worst case, fire discipline is lost and the unit has to be reorganized next round. Melee is brutal and mostly short affair. The attacker usually has an advantage, but has often taken damage in the charge attack. This is mostly about taking the ground of the defender, or failing to do it. The chapter on moral is probably the one you frequent the most when playing the game for the first time. Here you can find the possible states of a battalion or brigade as a clear summary. And as the game progresses, discipline and moral will break down more and more. The aim is to remain able to preserve discipline longer than the opponent. What can be aided or shattered by destiny? Destiny comes into play when a natural 12 is rolled, with the usual 2d6. It can help your side or hurt your opponent. What happens is rolled on a table. In my test game, the audacious advance of the vanguard was stopped when the brigade general was knocked out by a shell from a French defense fire, and panic broke out among his men. The rulebook ends with a large selection of optional rules, point values for various units, and a scenario. You will look in vain for conventional army lists, but actually you don't need them for this game. An index, on the other hand, would have been nice. It takes a long time to look for some rules. In the meantime, however, I have learned that the most important terms are mentioned in the table of contents, which can serve as an emergency index. How did I like the rules? The game dynamic reminded me of the last review, Soldiers of Napoleon, as said. Instead of cards, a sophisticated command mechanism was used here to depict the chaos of battle. If you appreciate the loss of control, then General Armee is a treat. An ideal game for me, who currently acts more as a solo player. If you like control and reliability in your game, this may be not your cup of tea. You need a bit of affinity for the usual two Fatality games here. In other words, if you like Black Powder, but don't like the multiple movements on good throws, then this might be something for you. So far, my thumbs up for General Armee. As I write here, the choice for the next review seems to fall on drums and checos, large battle. I'm curious if it stays that way until the video is finished. Till then.